Great.
Nice to meet you.
All right, it's time. So let's get this party started, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate it. As the Men's ADHD Support Group, we are here to help men with ADHD find the support and care that they need and build a community. We also want to help educate them and their loved ones on ADHD and how it affects our lives and how we can change things, how we can manage things more effectively. And to that end, we host these monthly get-togethers where we bring in experts who really understand this stuff. And so this month we've brought in Lisa Rabinowitz. Lisa is a certified Gottman Impact couples therapist and relationship coach with over 30 years in the industry. Again, we really want to say thank you for coming on, Lisa. Tell everybody about yourself. Tell us about why you do the ADHD and relationships and couples thing.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I do the couples thing because I have seen from my own personal life the impact that without education and without knowledge, marriage is really hard. And when you throw in ADHD into the relationship, it's even harder. So I want to make sure that couples get that information and get those skills and get those tools that they need. And that's what got me started on this path. And it's really been my passion to see couples move from a place of feeling like they're exhausted, going around in circles, not getting anywhere, feeling like they're butting heads to a place of most of the time happiness and peaceful, being able to have conversations and feel like they feel heard and understood. It's the reason I get up in the morning. So,
Yeah, I'm actually really blessed to be married to a special education teacher. Like she knew I had ADHD before I knew I had ADHD, like when she read my dating profile, apparently. And so like when we got into the relationship and we actually started delving into and finding out all this stuff together about my own ADHD and eventually autism, it was a lot of us having to kind of change and reshape our mindset about what communication meant. Because now, like, there's actually a reason why when she asks me to do a very specific thing, I do exactly that thing that she asked me to without going out of my way to do anything extra with it. It's because of
mm,
my literal way of thinking with the autism side of things. I literally, you asked me to do this exact thing, I did the exact thing. It did not occur to me to do the other tangential things that are related to doing that exact task. And so, like, how do we communicate that? How do we communicate? Like, how do we work around that? The different way of communication, the different way of understanding, of experiencing the world. So it's really
mm,
fascinating that you're in this realm. I really appreciate it.
mm.
Um, so talk to us about that. What are some of the differences in communication styles with people who have ADHD, both as male, female? What's the differences there?
So I didn't mention this, and I hope it's okay to mention it, but my book, Why Won't You Stop Interrupting Me, is basically based on the challenge that so often couples come in. And what do I hear all the time? Stop interrupting me. Why won't you stop interrupting me? Which is one of the 15 communication challenges that I discuss in the book. I think this is really important and key. It's not just the ADHD partner, it's not just the neurodiverse. If you have a partner who is neurotypical, I actually have 8 things that they might be doing because we can't forget that this is a couple and this partnership, it's like a dance. When you do this thing, I do this thing. When you do that thing, I do that thing. And as the couple works together, it can be feel like we're stepping on each other's toes or a beautiful dance. And we want to really make sure that we understand what are the challenges that you have, what are the challenges that you have, and the other piece is that I can have two neurodiverse partners, and this one might be having challenges over here, and this one might be having challenges over there. And so we really do need to slow down and ask ourselves and notice and become aware. So that's amazing that you and your partner, were had well, she it sounds like she had some of that awareness, brought it to you. Oh, wow. That's interesting. And then be able to have a dialogue about the different challenges because there's so many of them.
Yeah, a lot of it was just because ADHD side of things, right? Whenever I would go to try to explain something to her or something like that, and I'd get lost in the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And she's ready to go this path with me, and I went on a tangent, and she's like, okay, wait, that was a how did we get here? Like, how do we
Right,
wrap back? And I'm, of course, my memory is I have no idea what I came in here to actually talk to you about.
right, right, right,
Something
right.
in what I just said was relevant.
Right, right. I always talk about, like, your partner probably goes from X to Y, right? And we go X to A to Q to R to S to A to, well, maybe get to Y, I don't know, but it's not linear. It's around. And we do get lost sometimes.
How, how do you navigate that? How would you work with a person to get them to understand that struggle, what you just described right there?
I do a lot of informing, a lot of educating, a lot of trying to bring for both parties a lot of patience and compassion that you're coming in with you. This is the way you think we're going to communicate X to Y, right? But your partner is coming in and they don't understand that. They think we're going to do this path to get there. And usually, as soon as I start explaining it, and then as soon as the couple's talking, be like, okay, there's the example, right? That just happened. And they go, wow, that's happening all the time. I'm like, yes, it is happening all the time. And now, I think as soon as you see it, you can't unsee it. That doesn't mean that the frustration or yeah, we'll just call it frustration, sometimes upset, another maybe stronger words can happen, but at least we can see it. And then when you see it, then you can know, okay, now what do we do? Right? Because if you don't see it, then you can't do the now what do we do? And so then we have to do the next step, which is, so now how do you want to have this conversation look differently? And that's for each couple could look very different. It could be one couple, says, okay, talk for 2 minutes and then let me make sure we're in the same spot. I'm understanding you. I'm with you. Now let's go another 2 minutes. So that's one example. But couples, I really encourage each couple, we sit down, we try to figure out what's going to work for the two of you, because I can't get to the finish line, right? Yay, I'm there. Where's my partner? Oh, they fell a mile back and they're still there, right? Like we have to go together. And the only way we're going to go together is if we, make sure that we keep our eyes on each other and really stay together in this communication, which, you know, to neurotypicals just together can have challenges communicating.
So, whenever you're having that difficulty, like when do you need to kind of take a step back and say, I may need some help
Mm,
getting support? Like we've recognized that there's an issue, right? Maybe you're coming to these calls and you're kind of like, I know there's something going on. At what point do you realize that you need to have help or you should seek help?
right. Usually people seek help when they've tried it on their own and when they start feeling that level of frustration, or I don't feel heard, I don't feel listened to, I don't feel understood, I don't feel validated, and it starts to get exhausting. Those roundabouts that we all hate. Well, when our conversations sound like, didn't we do that conversation yesterday and the day before and the week before? That's exhausting. It's using so much energy. And again, I always say, when you get into a conversation, usually people want to get somewhere, right? And if you're just going around that roundabout, that's going to be a problem for the two of you. So certainly you don't want to wait to the point, but couples do sometimes wait to the point of you're screaming and yelling, slamming doors, not talking for 2 days. That definitely is a sign that you want to do something now. But sometimes you can catch it earlier and not wait to that point. So, oh,
So should people who are in healthy relationships get therapy if they're just kind of touching base and stuff like that, do you think?
yeah. I do have couples come in, their relationship's healthy. They want to do, like, we go in and we have our oil, if we have a car, right? We have an oil change, we have a tune up, rotate the tires. Not saying that a relationship's like a car, but in some sense, right? You keep an eye, your car is important. You want this car to last. You want to be driving that thing for 5, 10 more years. Well, we want to make sure our relationship also lasts. So if we're not doing certain things to take care of it, then it might not last. So
Right.
I usually tell people, like, it can't hurt. Let's do some things. Let's have some conversations. And some of those couples will see me, 5 times, 8 times. They'll learn some tools. They'll realize, oh, we'll put a few things in the closet there. Let's clear out those closets and, talk about a few things so the closet's not so full. And they just come out feeling like they have more ability to have conversations. And as life goes on, things can get more challenging. If you have children, as you get older, medical issues, mental health issues, that why not have some extra things to know how to have those conversations?
So, what are some of your favorite tools when it comes to communication? Like, do you have like a top three?
So I talk a lot about listening. I find that people think they know how to listen. And a lot of times their partner will tell them very clearly that, like, no, I don't feel like you're listening to me. And what does listening mean? And so that's part of a conversation I'll have with couples. And then I really ask them, you know, what would it mean? What does it look like when someone listens? And I will say this is one of Gottman's tools, and that is it's not just summarizing. That's a very common thing, like summarize what your partner said. That's great. And that is a tool. I know that I heard you, and I have to tell you, sometimes partners will summarize, and I go, were you in the room when they were talking? Because that's not what they said. So it's a great way to check, right? So summarize, like, let's just make sure I'm understanding you. But then the second piece is they found that they call them the master couples, the really successful, happy couples would validate their partner. Now, this is difficult. How does one validate their partner? So sometimes people will say to me, well, I don't want to say that I hurt you. If the person's saying, I'm hurt by this or I'm upset about this, and I'll tell the person, it's not that you're saying, yeah, I tried to hurt you. Yep, yep, that's what I did. No, that's not validation. Validation is that you understand, you bring empathy, you bring compassion, and put yourself in your partner's shoes to be able to really understand their struggle, what they're going through. So I might say something like, I'm understanding right now how hurt, upset, whatever the feeling is. And then about what? Like, what is it that the person's really struggling with? And so that can be a quick and easy tool. And usually people will tell me the following: wow, you stopped. Again, you listened to me by doing the summary. And then you made me feel like you really get what's going on for me. And that's why it's so powerful, because frequently this is how conversations look. You say something, you say something, you say something, you say something. I call that the ping pong. But nobody's really listening to truly understand. We're listening to respond. And so I'm not really taking in what you're saying. So that might be more than one or two tools in there.
Let's play around with that one, because I think there's a lot of value there. Because a lot of times, especially in the behavioral therapy, when I was like trying to learn social back and forth, and one of the reasons why I really got frustrated with the ABA style therapy that I was in, was because it was like, you need to repeat back what the person said. I'm like,
Right.
okay, that's fine, but do I have to do that with every single conversation I went in with everybody? And
Right.
my therapist was like, well, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so when do I do that? So, like, how can I signal to my partner, or how can they signal to me that this is a conversation where I need to feel heard?
Yes, great question. So actually what I do is with couples, I'll set up in my book, I call it the nook. Couples will call it their space or their, cozy areas. Couples call it different things, but we actually create a space in people's homes because I do only virtual. So I get to see all the different things, the dogs that come in, the children who are knocking on the door, trying to, interrupt while we're having therapy sessions. So I get to really see what's going on, but we create a space where this is where we talk and have conversations. Because imagine this, we're in the kitchen. I'm doing the dishes. My partner's in the refrigerator looking for dinner, right? Let's have a conversation. Oh, I will feel so heard and understood in that situation. No. People all the time? Yes. Right. So instead, I say, okay, you can talk about like, oh, don't forget to take out the trash tonight. If that's not a big issue for you, for some couples, that's not the best place to talk about it. But let's just make believe for right now. That's not a big thing for the two of you. Make believe. So you can talk about anything that's light, simple. Did you know that it's supposed to snow today? Oh, yeah. Do we have the shovel? Talk about that in the kitchen while you're running around trying to get breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever it is. But when we have something that we really want to talk about, I want you to understand what's on my heart. I want to understand what's going on for you. Then let's go to our spot. Now, again, if you have young kids, sometimes you can't just like drop everything and go to that spot. It might be like, can we talk tonight at 9? Okay, yeah, let's plan. And at 9 o'clock, we're going to all show up there
Mm-hmm.
and let's sit down and let's have that conversation. So everybody knows in this space is when we slow down. That's the other thing. There's not a tool associated with slowing down, but that ping pong that does this, like, okay, nobody's listening, right? So again, I help couples practice. Sometimes they'll even take a ball and they'll sort of toss it gently to each other and really slowly. So I give them sort of that feel of like, this is how the conversation, if you're just having a normal conversation, not doing what I described, really should look like. But if you have that space, we know that's when we're talking about not what's for dinner, but something that's really, I want to be heard about. I really want you to understand. Really want you to listen. So does that answer that question?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're essentially saying create the space,
Right, the
right?
space.
And have the conversations in that space so that the person's not on their phone, watching TV. It
Yeah.
needs to be a separate space. So when we're communicating with our partners, there's the general conversation, right?
Yes.
And then there's the, all right, actually, let's have an actual discussion.
Yeah. This
And
is important. Yeah.
yeah, so I really like that. That's a lot of things like whenever my wife and I are having discussions about money, that's one of the
Yeah.
things that she does. She goes, "Hey, let's have a conversation later on when you're ready. Let's have a conversation about money. I just want to
Yeah.
go over expectations."
Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
she and I have worked on this before.
Yeah.
This has actually been one of those sticking points for us. It's like when you say, "Hey, I want to talk to you about money," I am immediately terrified
Yeah.
because I'm a stay-at-home father. I'm an ADHD coach. Money is not always the greatest for me. There's times and so I feel guilty a lot. So, but she and I had a discussion. Hey,
Mhm.
if you need to talk to me about money, set up time with me. Like,
Mhm.
let me work up to it, and then let's have that conversation, making sure like I'm able to focus on what you need
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
get back and forth. And it's not always negative. That's the other
Right.
thing that I really appreciate about her is that she really tries to make sure that like it's not us just saying this is when we talk about the bad stuff. This is when we go and have conversations, period.
Right.
And like where
Right.
she wants to feel heard and which she wants to say good things too, that she makes sure that this is not just the bad place. It's a
Yes.
place where it's just a discussion.
Mhm.
All we're here for is a objective discussion as much
Right.
as we are capable of. Now, I
Right. Right.
guess harder conversations like struggles or actual pain points,
Yeah.
a little bit different there, but at the same time, if you already have that space, then it's good. And speaking
Yeah.
of ours, it's like the nighttime cuddles just before bed, where we
Yeah.
actually are looking each other in the face and actually having a conversation. So,
Yes. Yeah. So special, very, very special time. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned because the space that you create, I do ask couples to have a list of things like phones are going to be left in the other room or turned off. Maybe we want comfortable pillows or blankets or fidget toys or whatever it is that we need to have in that space to have that conversation go well. It's so, so important because let's set ourselves up for success here. So
mhm.
let's have whatever we need. If you need pen to doodle, have pens to doodle, right? Whatever it is. And put the appreciations. I want you to, you had mentioned that it's not just a space to talk about like, I don't want this is our space that we're going to criticize each other, right? No, this is our place that we can talk about appreciations or gratitude or whatever is important to us. Let's use that space. So definitely important, not just negative because no one will ever want to go there again. So
Yeah. So create the space, create the environment, use it for everything, not just negatives. And a lot of times, what you know, when we're dealing with that is like also trying to communicate in a way that the other person is receptive to. So our tone, Like,
Yeah.
how do we tone? Because tone is so important for people with ADHD that you may be distracted and actually dealing with like a problem email, and you ask us a question, but the tone you're conveying is the problem email tone, not the, hey, can you take out the trash, question that you asked. Like,
Right. Right.
oh, come on, God, can you take out the trash?
Right.
Uh, yes. Why are you talking to me that way? Like,
Yes.
no, I was referring to this email is really annoying. Like, but that communication never happened. It's just like I heard the tone. You're mad at this, not mad at me. Like,
Right.
you know,
Checking it.
like how do you check in? Like, wait, everything okay? And
Right.
like, how do we have that conversation?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
So,
that conversation is so important, right? Like, because
yeah.
otherwise, if I think you're upset with me, then I start anticipating and start
Mhm.
coming in negative, right? I'm going to reflect that right back, right? So if you don't ask the question of like, everything okay? Or the partner goes, oh my gosh, this is a horrible email. I'm really sorry, just upset about that thing, not you, right? This is
Yeah.
about both of you sharing or asking and getting curious so we can not get stuck, because again, that could be a place you guys get stuck, right? Because of
Mhm.
all these assumptions.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little
Sure.
bit.
Yeah.
One of the biggest issues that we see in the men's group is men coming into the group
Mhm.
and they're already at the breaking point. We kind of touched on this earlier.
Yeah.
They're already at the breaking point. Things are already really broken
Mhm.
in a relationship. It's really struggling. They're having a hard time communicating ADHD. Like, what signs do you look for that the relationship is salvageable?
Mm, mm. Relationships that are salvageable, in my experience, is people coming in willing to do work. Willing to do work. When people are like, he's the problem or she's the problem, my hands are going to be really tied, because how do I help you if you don't say, okay, we have a problem, we don't know how to fix this, and can you help us? Right? That is salvageable. But if you cannot take any responsibility, you see that you've done absolutely nothing, you're sort of what we call half out, like looking around what else is going on out there in the
Hmm.
world, that also is a really difficult sign. Sometimes people will say to me, my partner has said it's over. I don't actually take that as they actually mean that it's over. So let me clarify that, because that's important to clarify. When we get upset, get emotionally dysregulated, we say all sorts of stuff, right? And so we want to be able to understand if that's said in that moment, right, which is really threatening the relationship, there's a good possibility it's not true. I'm just sick and tired of this. I'm frustrated. I'm resentful. I'm angry. I'm mad. And so now I'm lashing out at you.
Hmm.
Right? People come and say, it's over because they said that thing when we were in our last fight. I go, okay, maybe it could still be salvageable. Are you willing to give me, and I tell people, give me 2 months, 2 months. And I've not been wrong up until this point. I can tell you whether it's going to be salvageable. I'll tell you whether it's going to work, because this is one of the things, this is one of my tests. Don't tell anybody that. I'll say, okay, we meet and I get to know them. And then I'll say, okay, I have a 2-minute exercise or a 2-minute video. Will you guys do it? Oh yeah, we'll do it. Okay. You know, let me know. Come back the next week. Okay, guys. So how was that 2-minute video? Oh, we didn't watch it. Did you do the 2-minute homework? No, didn't do it. Hmm. Now, I know for ADHD, homework's difficult. I know that doing something is difficult.
Hmm.
But when we practice it, like for instance, there's a 2-minute exercise that I give people, we practice it in session and you go, oh, that's great. That was really, really helpful. I feel so much better now.
Hmm.
And you won't do that outside once. It really takes 30 seconds. We have to start asking ourselves, it's good that you're showing up in session, but what are you willing? to do to make this relationship work. You spent 5 hours, being upset with each other. How about 30 seconds of doing something positive, right? It becomes clear whether people want it to shift. And we also know from the research is that the disaster couples, the unsuccessful and unhappy couples are doing apologize, less than one positive interaction, less than one positive interaction. So for every, they're doing almost the same or more negative, right? So the successful couples do 5 or more positive for every negative interaction. So you have to sort of notice that, here you are. If you're really so desperate to make this relationship work, what are you going to do? Because if we have this emotional bank account, you guys are overdrawn, right? You've taken way too much money out of this bank account. You're going to need to start doing things to put positives in. So what are you going to do? Right? I tell people, I can't make you do anything. I can give you, try this, and we try them in session. And usually people go, oh, that's really good. I feel so much better. But now you got to do them outside of session, right? Because you got lots of between sessions and it's hard.
So you talk about that kind of stuff, and it's
Yeah.
ironic because one of the biggest struggles that I've dealt with, and I've actually seen this in friends of mine too, especially with people with ADHD,
Mhm.
is kind of the out of sight, out of mind kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
We get to a point where we take for granted the person that we're with, and we forget to say the
Yeah.
nice things
Oh,
and
yeah.
do the nice things and remember to, because
Oh, yeah.
it's just not a. I actually had a therapist who told me whenever we were working on a project together, she goes, and I was it's general, like, hey, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And she goes, set a reminder.
Exactly.
And I'm like, what do you mean set a reminder? She goes, set a reminder to say something nice to your wife.
Yes.
And I'm
I
like,
have, oh, yeah.
I can't
The,
have Alexa be like, hey, Shane, say something nice to your wife. It's just okay, have it say something else that you attribute to say something nice to your wife.
oh,
And it,
yeah.
and so like secretly it's like do the dishes.
Yeah.
It just says do the dishes, and I'm like, and I've trained myself to do it. And my wife caught on. She's like, every night at 10:05, you come in and say something sweet to me. Why? And I said, because every night at 10 o'clock, the alarm goes off to go say something. And she's like, that's really sweet. And I had
Yeah.
felt so much guilt and shame about this
Oh,
because I was
yeah.
like, I have to have something to remind me to tell the person I care about something. And it was like, I have ADHD though.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. No, 100%.
struggle.
Right. This is why not use that? I've had people who they automated like to send their partner like different positive messages throughout the day. Tell couples use ChatGPT. Someone's like, I don't know, what do I say? Go ask ChatGPT what to ask, what to say, right? And I explained it to couples. There is nothing wrong because it might not be in your mind to say something. It might not be, top of mind or you just don't know what to say. So, and usually couples like your wife are like, great, fantastic, whatever it takes, because it feels good for her. Like she's enjoying it.
Right?
So
And it's
I'm
not
so
like
glad.
it doesn't mean we don't mean it, right?
Exactly.
It's like, because again, like if whenever it says it, and I actually sit here and I was like, hey, what is something I'm really grateful to my wife about today?
Yeah.
Like, what did she actually do today that was really cool? And it actually gets me to think about, like, oh, you know what? She did the dishes for me earlier today. I'm gonna
Mhm.
make sure I go say something, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the same reason why we need to journal, right? Like to talk about our gratefuls. Like, what is something that we're grateful for today?
Mhm.
And it's not that we don't actually feel good about that thing. It's just we just don't take the time to really acknowledge it as often as we need to.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Actually, Red just said it. Thank you very much, Red. That's actually really great.
Yeah.
Scheduling in active care is in of it and of itself an active care. Excellent. Great.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct.
Yes.
So I want to shift another gear. We
Mm.
also get a lot of people who come in and talk about how to make friends and actually start communicating with other people to make like how do you build relationships from the start? Like, how do you say hi to somebody? How do you open up in a conversation place? Is that something that you're comfortable talking about?
I sort of try to meet people where they're at. You gave
Hmm.
the example of saying hi. So for some people, saying hi is a huge step, right? And we'll talk about, can you think of somebody in your office that you would like to say hi to? Is there somebody in a group that you attend that you want to say hi to? And then I really start with that's it, right? Like that's just say hi, you know? And for some people, they're past that. Like they just don't know. I was actually speaking with someone, actually, I think it was yesterday or this morning, talking about, I say something, but I don't know how to keep the conversation going, right? Which is several levels up from just it's hard for me to jump in there and say something, right? So we practiced it, just sat there practicing it. Sometimes partners are willing, even though they're neurotypical, and they're like, that doesn't seem so hard. I just do it. They don't even think about it. And I'm like, okay, I know you don't think about it, but are you willing to just practice with your partner? They're thinking about going to the office party and they just feel like they're going to stand in the corner and not say hello to anybody. Can we just practice? And then usually people will come back and report on how it went. For some people, it's easier, and for some people, it's not so easy. So, again, I try to bring a lot of confidence and building up the person. That it takes a lot of courage to do that and just see really what they need. And sometimes they'll practice it with me. And so sometimes they'll even say to me, the body doubling, which I know we didn't really talk about, which I love talking about, but they'll sometimes ask a friend, can you do this thing with me? And they say, is this really body doubling? I'm like, oh, you can call it whatever you want. But you want to practice this thing. So you can call it body doubling if you want, but you're going to, practice it. Sometimes they'll just, they'll have a body double. Sometimes, and I don't know if we were going to jump into this, but sometimes it'll be a partner. Sometimes it won't be their partner. So say it's somebody on the computer that's doing their work and they're on their computer doing their work, you know, I'll sometimes say like make up conversations, or even ask chat again, back to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT, like I'm going to this thing, fill in the blank. I'm nervous or anxious to talk to people. Can you give me like 2 or 3 things that I should say? And they come back and they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. That sounds really great. And I said, okay, try to say it in your own words, make it yours, and then give it a try and see how it goes. And for the most part, people will come back with positive experiences, you know, so.
I, I think one of the biggest values that I have found is that, like, especially as somebody with ADHD and autism, it's okay to not be interested in conversations with the things that are being said around you. It's okay to not be involved. Like,
Right.
if it's not a thing that you want to talk about, you don't actually have to. You can just follow along, and that's okay. Now, the thing that I struggle with is sometimes A, I
Mm.
overcompensate. I take over conversations. I tend to like really drill into them, and I have a hard time pulling that back. Now, my wife and I, we have a trick on that. Like, she'll rub my leg if she feels like I'm starting to dominate a conversation.
Yeah.
Like, she'll
Yeah.
tap me on the leg, and we did that because I told her I struggle with this thing. Can you help me with it?
Right.
And she's like, yeah, I got you. And that's just her way of not having to confront me or to call me out in front of
Right.
everybody.
Yeah.
It's also just her helping me. And so if your partner can go with you to an event or things of that nature, it's okay to ask for people to do that.
Right. Yeah. Can I tell you a really funny story on that note?
Go for it,
Yeah, so
100%.
yours was your wife rubbing your leg. So I had a couple who was also like trying to figure out what cue they were going to use. And so they came up with this one. Can I have a drink of water? Right. So they come back the following week. They were at the event, and they come back and she goes, I said, can I have a glass of water? He went and got the glass of water and just continued on the conversation. We all chuckled because I've had other things like, oh, it's raining outside, which was the cue. And everybody looks outside and it's a sunny day. And everybody looks back at the person like, what was that? Right. So, sometimes we miss the cue. Sometimes we make up cues and they go flat. Right? That didn't work. So you got to play with it a little bit. And I'm glad that you guys came up with something that does work.
What do you think is one of the biggest successes, or where do you see the biggest success in relationships when it comes to a neurodivergent person with a neurotypical person?
Success in what way? Can you help
Where,
me?
like, what are some of the biggest signs of success when you look at a relationship that's healthy?
Okay. So we look for, does this couple feel safe and secure? Now, I don't mean like anybody's physically or verbally or anything else doing any kind of abuse, but there's signs that the relationship is safe. So for instance, you had mentioned that if your wife said something in front of everybody, that would be very embarrassing and probably even shaming. And that's actually one of the pillars we talk about, that we never throw anybody under the bus in public or in private. That includes ourselves, right? So that's part of creating a safe and secure relationship. Another example, that we make all major decisions together. Any actions, anything we do, we make sure it's good for both people. Can't be good for just one. I'm going to buy a $50,000 car without asking you or saying anything to you. For most people, they don't have that kind of just money laying around to just make that kind of decision, and doesn't really impact both people. So that's another one. Another example is that other ways to create safety and security. So for instance, morning and night, leaving and coming from work, these are transition times that couples who connect with each other. So for instance, if you're leaving, that you say goodbye to each other. You don't just like leave and, did my partner leave? I don't know if they left for work yet. When we come home, that we greet each other, that there's a point of connection. Actually, hugging was one of those that was found to be the most successful, talking about, again, secure couples and couples that feel satisfied and close and connected, and actually at the rest of the evening would fight less if they just welcomed each other home with a hug, and not like a hug like this. Hug. No, like really hug, embrace, heart and chest and stomach touching, because that's actually releasing certain hormones in the brain that create a bonding and connection, and actually will relax the two of you, hopefully actually relaxing each other, to hold it for 30 seconds or so. And then you feel like, again, like I'm coming home. This is a safe place. The same thing with waking up and going to bed, that these are things that we do for the most part together. We talk to couples, that, sometimes they don't, I'm not going to wake up with my partner at 5 in the morning just to say goodbye if my wake up is at 9 a.m., right? How do you make sure that you connect in the morning when you both are awake? Or what about if one of you likes to go to bed earlier and the other one likes to stay up later? Do you tuck each other in, say goodnight to each other? Those kinds of things help people feel safe and secure. Just like tonight, most people, they're going to lock their doors and unlock their windows. They feel a sense of safety and security. So there's certain things that we also do that create a sense of safety and security. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
That's excellent. I really appreciate it. So we were going to open up the floor for some questions. Are you good with that?
Sure.
Yeah. Um, I do want to ask one real quick from a conversation I saw earlier. When you're dealing with somebody who doesn't want to acknowledge like ADHD or autism or your neurodivergence,
Mhm.
how do you get them to understand the struggle that you deal with whenever it comes with dealing with that kind of issue and they don't seem to want to understand it?
Yeah. That is probably the most difficult situation that I come across. I try, and I know it's very hard not to get defensive and upset. Like, why don't you want to understand me? I normally have found the following. Usually, two things happen. One, there's some kind of messaging in the partner that doesn't want to know or isn't curious, wants to reject the idea or think. And I've had people say, like, oh, ADHD, that's not a thing. Autism, that's not a thing. On the spectrum, oh, it's just all made up, right? That there's some messaging from their own family of origin. So I usually try to dig in there a little bit and try to start understanding, is there something that when they were younger happened to them or they were told that then impacts right now in this moment? And I would say 90% of the time I find something back there that really is impacting right now. And then I try to help the ADHD partner or the neurodiverse partner understand, like, okay, this partner is really struggling with this because they were told that their mental health issues, it's not a thing, it's in your head, you made it up, right? So if you were told that as a child, here you are, right? That's been basically brainwashed into your mind, right? So now you have a partner and you're like, oh no, that can't be a thing. Oh, try harder, right? Right. Typical, right? Try harder. If you really wanted to do it, you could do it, right? These kinds of things are messaging that usually happened earlier on. Then there's a few other, I said, like, I don't know, I don't know if I said 80 or 90%, but that's usually it's about 90% of those kinds of things that I find if I start really digging and trying to understand. And then this other percentage can get more complicated of what do you do if someone just,
Doesn't care.
yeah.
I mean, is
Uh,
that kind of a sign that the relationship is
those
uh
really, yeah.
yeah. So if we take HD or autism out of it, like what does that conversation look like if the issue is cancer or another illness? If you're not willing to take the time to understand why I have to have certain nutrients, or I have to go to the hospital for a certain reason, or I have to have a certain medication, that's kind of a sign that this is not a healthy place for us to be in if you're not willing to understand or care about that kind of thing.
Thank you
So
for saying that.
yeah.
Like I try to give people the benefit of the doubt as much as I can.
Mhm.
But then sometimes at the end of the day, even, and I do that same thing. I say, if they had diabetes and needed insulin, if they like, and sometimes the person still is not understanding. And then you have to decide as a partner, do you want to be with somebody that is not interested, doesn't believe, doesn't care? I don't want to make all those assumptions, but at some point it does get hard to think of, like, why are they not willing to listen, understand, read things? There's so much stuff out there now that you can read, you can watch, you can
Support groups that you can
support groups, podcasts
yeah.
that you attend that, you know,
Mm.
so I would,
All right. So we have a question from the group. Stephen, if you want to come off mute, you can ask your question, or if you want to drop it in the chat, you can feel free to do so.
Hello,
Yeah.
can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So it's not such a specific question, or it is, or
Mm,
it's like, do you have advice? So I find what happens for me with ADHD. So I was just telling my like partners here,
yeah.
and from listening to this, asking if there's any more
Mm,
like things that I could be doing. She's like, yeah, like further down the line, like kind of asking about more about my emotional world or follow up. And I was like, no, don't wait for me to do that. I don't think I do that properly.
mm,
And like train me. And I just feel like in general in a relationship, one thing that I've noticed, I don't know how to get out of, is that I get kind of like, because of the ADHD,
yeah.
I'm so caught up in my own world.
Mhm,
I'm
mhm,
unintentionally selfish because I just feel like I'm always kind of struggling. I always have struggles to talk about. I'm always kind of like trying to manage stuff that like,
mhm,
I think I'm improving,
mhm,
but
mhm,
I think I, unintentionally like totally those tips of like leaving space for someone else to talk. And also just the straight up struggle of ADHD, like just talk faster or like get to the end of it or something
yeah.
that I don't dig into someone's world enough or deeper. So any thoughts around that?
Yeah. I will say that I've had many people say, like, oh, my partner's so selfish.
Yeah.
And to me, I really try to slow that conversation down because first, I don't like anybody being labeled. It is part of the ADHD, just like you like the spontaneity and the creativity and these other benefits that are wonderful aspects. Well, here's some other things. And, again, when I'm working with couples, I'll ask them, they're always sitting and they're facing each other, having conversations. And if I see that happening, I might say to the other partner, like, okay, you see that he's drifting into his own world or whatever. What can you do to bring him back? And so, for instance, sometimes people will be like, you know what? I'm going to just gently tap his shoulder. I know this sounds crazy, but I've actually had couples where they put their feet on top of each other and that keeps them more grounded in the conversation. I do lots of fun
Well,
stuff in my office. Really try to come up with creative hand holding is nice, but it doesn't always lead both people staying in the conversation. I mentioned earlier about the 2 minutes and put a 2-minute timer on. Hey, everybody here? Check in. Everybody here? Everybody's here? Okay, good. Let's keep going. 2 minutes. Everybody here? Again, these are the important, serious conversations that we need to make sure that we're tracking and we're together. Because if you get in your head, like I described in that race, let's just go back to that race idea, you've fallen, you've dropped. So you're never going to get to the finish line together. So you have to track each other. And so sometimes sitting across from each other and being able to see each other's faces helps for some people that they don't like that eye contact, right? So we're with each couple, they sort of, I try to come up with some creative things of like, what can we do? Again, I gave that example of tossing the ball gently to each other. Sometimes that keeps people really engaged. For some people, they can't do that because they want to fidget with their hands and toss.
Literally tossing a ball?
I literally, yeah.
That came a little late.
Yeah, and I just had a video that went up, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and it was very funny because I had a ball in my hands and I thought, everybody who's watching this video, if you haven't seen like 5 minutes before what the couple was doing, they might wonder, why is she talking having this ball in her hands? Well, it was because I was teaching them how to stay in the conversation. And that's why the ball was sitting in my hands. But yeah, there's actually a literal ball. Now, for some people, that doesn't work. I even had a couple, they sat on the ground and they rolled the ball to each other. They had so much fun with it.
Talk when you're not holding the ball.
That's one way to do it. Or just even gently rolling the ball back and forth to each other. Keeps that sort of flow and energy move between the two of you. Again, I try different things with different couples to help with that. And you don't know sometimes what will work for one couple doesn't necessarily work for the other one. So I'm going to ask you guys, get creative. Say, let's experiment. This week we're going to experiment. Let's try different things and let's see how we stay together, because it sounds like you care about each other enough that you want to stay in the conversation.
Yeah.
Just how is a piece. And that's it.
Well, I'm looking at the comments, right? It was somehow I managed to do it. Like Rhett was saying, I think framed it better. So there's that part where it's like already being in a conversation. But Rhett was saying other exercises to build curiosity about each other's experience as a muscle. And to me, this applies for partnership and friendship. Like the times, sure, it's like one thing already being in a conversation. And one prompt I give for partners, like, please just tell me when something's important to you. Like, because I'll just word vomit, like, hey, this thing happened to me today. Like, whether it's like a freaking minor transaction or something, anything that was emotionally big to me, I would just like volunteer. So one, I've definitely learned that to cue people, like, because if I don't ask you, doesn't mean I don't care. I'll just tell you the question was like, are there exercises to build curiosity about each other's experiences, friends, partners, like remembering to do this? Because again, I'll be like in my own world. Oh, let me just tell you about all these things that happened today. And I could talk for like an hour about the 1,000 things and moments that I had. That happens every single day. But I like feel like I don't ask friends and other people enough.
Right. Again, with your partner, I might say, okay, you know what? You have 5 minutes, Stephen, and now I get 5 minutes. Right. And, I want to hear you. I want to listen to you, but, to create a sense of we both matter and we both count, or maybe it's 10 minutes or whatever, right? Like, again, it feels a little artificial, but when you practice that, you'll also start to notice like, oh, okay, this seems like a breaking point, right? The other thing, totally different piece here is that sometimes when you're in your head and you have all that stuff going on, sometimes silence or writing and saying, hang on a second, I'm going to write for a minute and dump it out, and then be able to come a little bit more present to the conversation can be something that can be helpful. Again, it's a little hard if you're not seeing it and knowing exactly what's happening in the moment, but those are things that sometimes couples will do and it can help. So
cool. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your question.
Especially at first, there's going to be a lot of artificial tools that you put in place to help you stay in the moment or in the time, right? Because like I was saying earlier, I have an alert that goes off to remind me to go say something nice to my wife. Now, I should, as a grown-ass person who loves my wife a whole lot, be able to do that. That's the social expectation. But I have ADHD, and so no, that's not how my brain works. Being honest about that with your partner allows them to understand you better. and being open about that thing. I am going out of my way to make sure that I have a tool in place to make sure I do what you need me to do. And like, this is me showing my commitment to you, is I'm going to make sure that I do this thing. This is the tools that I'm using. And so if your partner loves you and cares about you, how you do it shouldn't matter so much as that you do actually take the effort to do it. So keep that in mind and keep that in the conversation when you're having that with your partner or when you're with your people. Like, I have reminders to go off to remind me to message Mark on a regular basis, and he's my boss. Like, it's like putting the tools in place that we need, right, is important, and being honest about them helps people around us understand the struggles and issues that we deal with. And the people who are cool with that are the people who are actually worth your time going forward with. Just Shane asked a really good question earlier about, we've been talking about existing couples. How do we communicate the struggles and the things like that to newer people that we meet, like people who are just now getting into a relationship? How do we communicate that without sounding like a loser or a failure?
Again, I want to reiterate the point that, feeling like a loser, feeling like what's wrong with me is something that we definitely want to be able to address if we really ever feel like that. So I'm going to put that over here for right now. People, when you're first dating them, they love that you have ADHD. They love the really deep focus and the passion that you bring and the creativity that you bring and they love everything that you bring. So with all of that, right, there's different aspects, right? There's different parts of it. And so you sort of, I think, have to feel out the other person. Like, I wouldn't be like, okay, I want you to know all my problems. Let me dump them on you right now. If you feel comfortable, right, I think you have to check in with yourself. Do you feel comfortable, for instance, if you spoke for too long or you interrupted, to say like, this is something I'm working on, or I'm aware that I have ADHD and this sometimes happens and I realize that, and whatever it is that you want to say to them. I think for any healthy relationship, being honest, being transparent without being overwhelming, like I said, I'm going to dump everything right now, which can sometimes be hard not to dump everything right now and overshare, but it's part of that new relationship where people hopefully start to share, right? Like they're going to share also. I think that's important. They have their own struggles, right? So it's not you just coming to the table and you have all these things that you have issues with. Trust me, they do too. And sometimes we don't see that or notice that, but they have their own struggles, right? And so we're both going to be here sharing those and being able to vet the person. Do I want to deal with these? Right? Sometimes I think I have couples that feel like they couldn't vet well, I have ADHD, so if they can accept me, then, of course I have to accept whatever they bring to the table. No, you don't. No, you don't.
I mean, that's a big deal that we deal with in the group a lot. We get a lot of guys coming in and they are very clearly describing a relationship where there is emotional and mental abuse by the partner who is showing a lot of like really narcissistic tendencies, right? I don't like to like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to throw narcissism around as willy-nilly as we see it too often, but we do see a lot of guys who are dealing with emotional and mental abuse that they don't even recognize that it's abuse. And like they're just expressing themselves and then they're getting shut down and they don't feel safe enough to talk about different things like that. And so like going into new relationships with that kind of trauma, this is why you need therapy, everyone, by the way. Like that's a good reason why. But like going in with that trauma, like opening up to other people, like it hurts us. Somebody asked in the group about rejection sensitivity. This kind of plays into that facet as well. We feel things more, by the way, everyone. We feel things more. That's a thing that happens with us. So like, how do we communicate that rejection sensitivity to people And, you know, so that people understand how they can communicate with us to make us not feel like we're being rejected.
Right. Yeah. This is something that I deal with on a daily basis, and saying I didn't intend, I didn't mean to, and giving all sorts of explanations, I tell people, do not work. So leave that over there. Just like on your first date, or let's just say the person wore a shirt, you're like, don't really like the shirt. You probably didn't say anything, right? Or maybe they got a little spill, right? You probably didn't say anything. And I find that sometimes when people get into relationships, they think they can just say anything. And people say, well, I'm just blunt. I'm just straight. I'm just honest. No, that's rude and obnoxious and hurtful. So no, we don't say every single thing that comes, it came out, so I'm going to say it. Now, of course, ADHD might have their own challenges around that.
I was going to say, so as a
Yeah,
person with
yeah,
ADHD,
yeah. Right. I understand that you might have your own challenge, but we're talking about the other
yeah.
person right now. That's who we're talking about, and that what they're saying, and how they say it. Well, let's just level the playing fields, that we are both going to need to try to work on what we say, how we say it, because there's rejection sensitivity that we need to take into consideration. I hate labels. I don't want to hear you're too sensitive, you're oversensitive. No, that doesn't go here. This is how the person feels. And so a lot of times I'll say, take two, let's try that again. Or just ask your partner, say that nicer, say that gentler, say it in a different way. If we are a partnership that we take care of each other, then I should be able to say that to you. And again, the ADHD partner who might blurt out something or might say something without thinking might have their partner say the same thing to them, like, hey, could you say that differently? Can you do that again? Take two. Let's try that conversation. Can you walk out, come back in, and let's start again? Right? Like, that sometimes happens.
Mhm.
It's okay. And that's what we do. So,
But how do we kind of touching back into the previous question though, like when we're having these conversations initially though,
initially.
like yeah, like how do we have that conversation to start with? Like I'm trying to imagine the conversation, like I can do it because I've worked on this for years and years and years.
Okay.
But like how do you have that conversation? Like I take things literal, or I take things like rejection is a big deal with me. How do you start that conversation?
I was talking about like a more, committed couple, but
Yeah.
back, let's just talk about how we communicate. Let's talk about how I hear things. I want you to understand me. I want to understand you. Let's talk about it. I think it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly. I don't like the elephants in the room, and we're just going to ignore that. Right? It's stomping everywhere, and we're just going to make believe we don't see it. No, let's just talk about it. And so I encourage couples, right? Because it will come out eventually. If it's not obvious, it will happen, right? So being preventive or preemptive, I think, is much better than reactive. And now after this situation happens, now I'm going to have to go back and go like, okay, well, that was this rejection sensitivity. Let me explain that to you, right? But to me, that is sometimes a harder conversation than talking about it earlier on and having that, again, honest conversation, because again, they're going to probably bring something to the table. So, I should be open if the person's like, no, I don't want to deal with that. Well, why go on, for 6 months when you just found out about it in the first month? You should be vetting each other and figuring out if the person can manage and deal with it. And I will tell you that people will tell me the following. The partner did say it earlier on in the relationship and they didn't get it. They didn't really understand. Partners just said in passing, oh, I'm ADHD. Oh, okay. Like, pass the butter,
Right.
whoa, you really, again, at that point, now we're 2 years into the relationship and we're struggling. We didn't know what ADHD really meant. So again, don't do it in a conversation that's meaningful and intentional. but you might need to start unpacking that over some time of like, what does that really mean and what does that look like? And some people will be like, oh, can you show me a book on it, or can I read something on it? And again, keep that one. All right. If they want to learn, they want to understand, terrific. That's a good sign. Check on that. I would say listen to the response to as you're sharing this. What do they do with it? So
Yeah. So there's a lot of value to that. I think I want, if it's okay for me to add something to it, separate yourself from the ADHD. You don't necessarily have to talk about ADHD and autism specifically to you. You
right.
can actually sit here and say, hey, this is one of the reasons why we do so much work in the men's group, is to build awareness about what ADHD is and what autism are. Like, the more that you know about these issues, the more that you're able to talk about it in abstract methodology, where you're able to inform a person. ADHD is, this is a neurodevelopmental issue that I struggle with. This is what it means for me. Right.
Mhm.
And if the person is open to it and an example comes up later on, especially like rejection sensitivity or something like that, like, oh yeah, this is actually a really great example of something I struggle with, is rejection. When you said that the way you did, this is what I heard.
Yes.
Can we say that a different way? Is there a different way to have that conversation? Is there a different way for you to get my attention? You know, that all comes from the more that they understand ADHD in totality, the more that you understand it as well, the more that they are able to ask questions and dig into it, and y'all are able to explore the conversation more. Like, abstract yourself away from ADHD and autism and just have a conversation about what those issues are.
Right. And I don't know how many individuals here are either newly diagnosed or don't even know if they have it or not. But I've had people, with their partner go on this journey together. Like, let's
Mm-hmm.
learn about this. Like, let's read about it. And they both know very little. They both are unsure. And it takes processing to understand that. And like, even some grieving of what my life has been, what it could have been, and all these different, it brings up so many things. And so if you're in that spot and you have a partner that's willing to do that with you, that's fantastic.
It's also a great indicator if that partner's worth being around, if they're willing to go on a journey with you. I think whenever my wife and I really figured things out together was when, like, because she knew it, like, she understood. But like, whenever I told her that I had it, and I asked her, like, why didn't you say anything? She's like, I thought you were just being a dude about it. Like, she thought I was just like toughing out through it and everything like that. And I'm like, no, I'm just now discovering this. And she's like, that's a different animal altogether. And somebody else pointed out, like, other people have struggles in their lives as well. You being open about your ADHD allows them to be open about their anxiety, their frustration, their PTSD, their, other events in their lives that have been traumatizing. Like, having that conversation abstractly and allows them, and being open to them talking about their issue. That's communication. That's what that is. I didn't never really think about that, because for me, communication's always been about the small talk and all that, but it's all the interactions that we have with people.
Right. Right.
So I have a question for you. This is from a poll that I'd seen a few weeks ago.
Right.
What are your thoughts on love languages and how important are they in the relationship?
I love it. People talk to me all the time about love languages. I actually have one, or I think two articles on it. So it's not the most scientific evidence-based idea, but I tell couples the following. It seems to really play out in relationships. I had someone recently, again, I always will change the story, but he decided that he was going to do a getaway and plan this beautiful short little vacation for the weekend for his wife's birthday. She wasn't really happy. Now, for his birthday, he would have loved that, right? And so frequently, what do? We do what we like for our partner. She, on the other hand, she wanted other things, wanted a different love language, which was she would have loved if he had written her a long message and card. If she had, there's so many different things, but hers was words of affirmation. So yes, there's some question on whether this is a real thing or not, but I will say that couples very much share about I like quality time. I like physical touch. And so I tell couples, I don't know if there's a lot of scientific evidence-based research behind it, but it seems to be real. So let's just deal with it and, understand what your love languages are and go from there. So
Have you heard about the neurodivergent love languages?
I love it, love it. I didn't know if I should bring it up, but I guess it's very relevant. So in short, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about it or.
Yeah, so there's parallel play and body doubling, like where y'all are just side by side, not doing anything together, just in the same space, and maybe both on the phone, but you're
Yeah.
together. The space is together.
Right.
Info dumping, which I'm a big fan of. Penguin pebbling is my other thing. Penguin pebbling is, you see, like this, I have a friend of mine. She likes rubber duckies.
Yeah,
And like everywhere I go, every
Mhm.
time I go to a store or anything like that, if I see a rubber duck, I
Yeah.
buy it for her. She's just a friend of mine. She's
Yeah.
got like 40 ducks from me. And it's
Mhm.
like all part of her collection because she has this huge collection. That's penguin pebbling.
Yes.
Also, we
Yeah.
can do that with like little information. We do this with TikToks, by the way.
Yes.
Instagram, that one video that you watched that you sent to the person.
Right.
There was this joke I saw.
Yeah.
That's penguin pebbling, and then support swapping. Like, hey,
Mm.
if you do this thing, I'll do this thing for you.
Right.
That's a love language. And then deep pressure, like the hugs.
Yes.
Like some of us are neurodivergent where like if you touch me, I am offended and all life is ended as I know it. Some
Right.
people are like, give me the most deepest hug possible. So
Right.
neurodivergent love languages.
I see it every day in my office. Exactly these conversations. So whether
Yeah.
you talk about the typical ones that came out or these, definitely.
Figure out your love language and figure
Yeah.
out your partner's love language. Like there is something to making sure that I do make sure that I go tell my partner that I love her because that's something she wants. That's something she needs from me. She needs to feel appreciated, that I actually do value the work that she does. Now, as somebody with ADHD, with memory issues, I got to have an external tool to remind me to say something like about that. But what that did was over time, I got to the point of where it became more natural for me. It just took me a significantly longer amount of time. Same thing for y'all. So keep that in mind.
Sometimes people will do the habit stacking too. Like, I'm going to brush my teeth. And when I'm brushing my teeth, right after I'm done, I'll walk into the bedroom and tell my partner that appreciation.
Now my teeth are brushed. I can give a kiss.
And
So,
appreciation.
how do you, a final question, then we're going to wrap it up. How do you get back into relationships? How do you start the healing process if a relationship's ended?
The relationship ended, and
Yeah.
now I have to do my own individual healing.
Yeah.
I've had this where one partner decides they're going to come see me for individual counseling. I tell them two things. Stay in individual counseling for at least a year because you need to process what happened there. You need to process maybe sometimes why you picked that partner. So you don't pick the same partner because that is how our brains work. There's something that's familiar why we pick that partner. And I don't want you to now in a day, a month, or 6 months, pick the same partner, just different name, right? Different name. Might even look like that other person. I've had that before happen before too. But you want to really understand what the things happen. So you pick a different partner. And I tell them, no, if you're going to see me, there is no dating. I give them 3 months. I don't want you dating. I want you to focus on yourself right now and focus on understanding what happened, why that ended. So yeah, that's to me the most important. Make sure there's self-care, make sure there's also, friend support. The men's ADHD group, I'm sure, like you mentioned, you have other people that are healing, and this is a great place to support each other. So I think all of those things, family support, whatever you need to try to move through the healing. It's very important. Trying to go into, finding another partner, addictions is not going to heal you at all. So,
Yeah. I had to take a 2-year hiatus and rediscover myself after my first marriage imploded. By doing that, I came to a better understanding of who I was
Mm.
And what came from that was the dating profile that my wife found and enjoyed reading and actually messaged me from, because I did take the time to heal and learn about myself. Even though I didn't know ADHD and autism were a thing, I just learned acceptance of who I was. And I think that was the biggest key, was like getting back into that acceptance-based mindset of who I am,
Right.
and being happy with that person, at least
Yeah.
as much as I could be, right? I also wanted to be happy with who I was and where I was. So keep that in mind.
Yes.
All right. So how do people get a hold of you? How do they find you? I actually just put your link to your thing below.
Okay. So I think probably I didn't see the link, but I think Counselor for Couples is probably the best way. There will give you contact information by email. Quickly, I'll just say my email is Lisa R. So it's my first name with my first initial, Lisa R at T, like Tom, tsecuremail.com. But it's all on the Counselor for Couples. I think you have my link. Oh, we didn't talk about the free giveaway. Can I just mention it really quickly?
Yeah, I
Okay.
actually, that's the link I posted in the
I
chat.
didn't see-
So
I didn't see that. I just thought the Counselor for Couples.
Yeah.
Okay. So part of that link is not only that you can check out the website if you have any questions on my book or anything else that I do, but also that I wanted to do a free giveaway all about communication and some of the things that we talked about tonight, of creating that space and some things of how do you communicate, slow down those conversations, are on that giveaway. So I hope that you'll accept it and use it. And I'd love to hear from you. So please, email me back, let me know what worked, what didn't, what you liked. I'm always open to understand and connect. So please let me know. And thank you both. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you. And everybody for being here, and great questions. And I'm sorry I couldn't follow the chat and talk at the same time.
No, you did great. Like, we brought all the questions from the chat into
Okay.
the conversation. So thank you again for this. It was a
Sure.
joy having you here. For everybody who paid, we're going to get this copy out within the next couple of days. It'll be edited and all that stuff. And then in about a month and a half or so, it'll actually be public on YouTube. And so everyone will get to watch the video on YouTube and enjoy that as well. So
on our podcast too.
Oh, yep. And it'll be on our podcast. So it'll be shared all the places.
Good.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate your support. Considering the current political climate, we are going to be leaning a lot more on these for fundraising. We do depend on y'all. So if y'all can, please make sure to go to the website. Feel free to donate more if you like, become a monthly donator. We greatly appreciate all of it. And we love all the work that everyone does. Thank you.
Thank you.